Hi, and welcome to the Rare Business Podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm a consultant, advisor, researcher, and writer on all things related to customer service and customer experience. Through this podcast, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, and leading thinkers about what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees in this fast-moving modern age that we live in. If this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then welcome, and please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsco.com, as I've now completed over 250 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then thank you for returning, and I'll aim to do a good enough job to keep you coming back week after week. Anyway, that's enough from me right now. Let's get into the interview. So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Sandy Rogers, who is the leader of FranklinCovey's loyalty practice and also co-author of a new book, which we're going to talk about today. Hey, Sandy, how you doing?
Good morning. Hi.
So, Sandy, for the benefit of our listeners and readers, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and also a little bit about the work that you do?
Oh, I'm happy to. I spent most of my career at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. In fact, I spent 3 years with Enterprise in London, overseeing the operation there.
Oh, awesome.
And after a 14-year, I absolutely loved my experience and the opportunity to come turn around the customer service, which helped us bring the business back to profitability. And after a long career with Enterprise in London, back at corporate headquarters, I retired. And FranklinCovey and I formed a partnership to launch a loyalty practice and help other organizations do what we did at Enterprise, which is how do you measure customer service and then inspire and engage employees to improve it in order to drive faster business growth and improve profits over time.
Perfect. That's great. Now, I guess given that you're in this new loyalty practice sort of space, and also you're kind of retired, so you're free from the constraints of major corporate life, I guess. You've probably got time to, had time to write and think. And you've recently published a new book that is called, let me get this right, I've got the book in front of me, Fierce Loyalty, Cracking the Code to Customer Devotion, that you've co-authored with Lena Rin and Sean Moon. Congratulations, first of all, on that. And first of all, can you tell us a little bit about the book and its kind of main thesis and how and why it came about, just to give us a bit of background?
So, Adrian, we originally had a title that you mentioned, but we switched it to Leading Loyalty, just trying to emphasize the importance of being a loyalty leader in order to make it happen. And
that's what you get when you get an advanced copy.
So sorry, you got the advanced copy. But the book today is Leading Loyalty. And the gist of it is this. Everybody understands, I think, the value of loyalty. And we all want it. We want loyalty from our friends, our family, our colleagues, and we especially want it from our customers. The question is, how do I get it?
Yes.
And so much of the difference between a good and a great experience comes down to how we feel about the people serving us,
sure,
whether it's in face-to-face or it's online or over the phone. And so in this book, we talk about how to actually earn the loyalty of other people, not only in business, but in your personal life. And it comes down to three core loyalty principles: empathy, responsibility, and generosity. And there are specific, practices that go with bringing these principles to life. And that's what we talk about in each of the chapters of the book.
Fantastic. Now, I am just writing those kind of principles down because I want to ask you about those later. Of
course. But
the thing I wanted to ask you about first up is because you talk about, and this is what I wanted to dispel, because I guess when people they say loyalty, and they say a book about loyalty, leading loyalty. And a lot of the times that people are talking about loyalty and they might just jump to, it's a program or it's a thing where you earn points, right, or so on and so forth. But actually, right, in the book, you talk about leading loyalty leaders. I mean, what I wanted to do is just dig into that, because you're not talking about that. You're almost talking about habits and behaviors and feelings and, and insights and all these different things. But when you talk about leading loyalty leaders in the book, are you referring to leaders as people or leaders as organizations?
Both. So, Adrian, we right at the beginning say that this is not a book about reward programs, points, frequent flyer miles, and so on. Those things may be helpful, but they're so easily copied by competitors.
Yeah.
The key, I love Peter Drucker's, comment that, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Mm-hmm. Everybody gets the idea of having a winning culture. How do I get that?
Sure.
And so that happens through the behavior of our leaders and everybody in the organization who's touching customers. So we've got to get them to have a loyalty mindset and adopt this idea that the real way to earn the loyalty of other people is by having empathy for them, taking responsibility for their real needs, and being generous with them, giving them more than they expect. And so, okay, I get that. I learned that in kindergarten, but how can I take that common sense and make it common practice in more of the interactions that the people in the organization, including me, are having every day? Because you know what? We're busy. And so we got to carve out space and make it easier for people to do these things more often.
Okay. I mean, and so you mentioned these three principles: this empathy, responsibility, and generosity. Now, I'm a great one for trying not to make assumptions because about what things can mean, and how assumptions can be the root of pretty much many, if not all, of the troubles that we end up finding ourselves in as individuals or groups or societies in general. So would you kind of like take a moment and help us understand what you mean by each of these principles, and the ones of empathy and responsibility and generosity?
Of course. So with empathy, I mean, this is the first core loyalty principle. Empathy comes from two Greek words, meaning with, and pathos meaning feeling. It's, feeling with another person.
Right.
Empathy is our ability to identify with and understand, somebody else. And to earn somebody's loyalty, you got to have empathy. Now, we get that, but to have empathy, we've got to first understand what their hidden story is.
Right.
If you don't know what my story is and how I'm feeling, how can you have empathy for me? And so we teach that there are two practices to getting at my hidden story. First, you've got to make a genuine human connection. We all know the difference between a genuine and a fake connection, right? People that follow scripts rarely come across as genuine. And then we've got to listen to learn their story. I love that the Chinese symbol for listen contains the characters for the ears, eyes, and the heart.
Right.
It takes all three to really understand. The deepest need of the human heart is to feel understood.
Yeah.
And so that's the root of empathy. You got to get to their hidden stories so you can feel what they're feeling. Responsibility is the second core loyalty principle. With responsibility, we have to help them reach their goals, take ownership for helping them succeed. And so often in business, we see people not take responsibility for just simple things, simple requests.
Yeah.
And so the two practices to show responsibility is we've got to first discover the real job people are trying to get done, and then we got to follow up to make sure the job was done well. And if there's a problem, we teach in the book, how do you address and fix a problem so that you can turn an unhappy customer into a raving fan?
Right.
The third principle is generosity. So you got to have empathy, take responsibility for helping them succeed, but then you've got to be generous. And by generosity, we mean give them more than they expect. Exceed their expectations. And the two practices that generous people do is they share their insights to help make it easier for us to get things done, to, make things, less tedious, less work. And they also surprise us in unexpected ways, that bring joy. And I can give you lots of examples. The things that don't cost a lot, the little frugal wows, but they really leave customers feeling like, wow, that is so cool. You guys really obviously do care about me.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, because what you're doing is you're breaking it down into, rather than sort of broader, big, broad principles, into actual, almost activity streams. So empathy is like connect and listen, and responsibility to discover and follow up, and generosity is share and surprise, which is I really like.
Exactly.
I like that, because it's it's that whole idea of sort of bringing it to life rather than just talking about in broad brush kind of terms. But I guess the thing that I kind of also kind of really interested in is the world is full of models and frameworks. But could you give us some examples about, people and organizations that are bringing this sort of model, this sort of approach to life, and the sort of things that they've been able to achieve? Because I think that then that will then show the power of the model that you're talking about in the book.
And that's so important, because the last thing the world needs is another model that sounds great in theory but doesn't get implemented anywhere.
I didn't want to say that, but thank you for saying that.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, so what the book is organized. There's 11 chapters. There's 11 huddles.
Right.
In each chapter, we teach the principle and the practice, and then there's a huddle at the end. A huddle is just a little short 10, 15-minute meeting that you as a loyalty leader do with your team. Mm-hmm. And in these huddles, you do 4 things. First, you celebrate people who are doing the thing you talked about last week. It's not often what gets measured that improves, it's what gets celebrated. Yeah. You then teach the next principle or practice and how to apply it in the work that we do. 3, you ask everybody to make a small commitment. Hey, we just talked about, discovering the real job. Let's all try it this week, and we'll talk about it next week at our huddle. Okay. So through this huddle process, we take these theories and concepts and bring them to life. And it's the celebration, Adrian. I mean, that's what really gets people's attention. Yeah. We got to model, teach, and reinforce this stuff through celebration to bring it to life.
Okay. Perfect. But what I was wanted to ask you about is that, do you have like some exemplar companies that you think you hold out as being, these loyalty leaders that you think actually, they've got it nailed? Because I was on the phone actually earlier on to my broadband provider because I got an email about my kind of contract's nearly up, and the discounts were going to go away, and I was going to go into the standard tariff. And then so I called them up and absolutely brilliantly called them up and got straight through to somebody, which was brilliant. So that one that was that was a surprise. It was brilliant. Completely unexpected. You're like going, you had me at hello. And then then we went through the process. We were talking about the different options, and I'd pulled up their webpage and looked at kind of the different options, because we were talking about different sort of options. And the person I was speaking to was quoting me a price, and I said, however, that looks like that's different to what you're quoting on your webpage. And then they turned around and said, oh yeah, that's sort of the price for new customers. I nearly. Good job I hadn't taken a sip of water at that time, because I think I would have needed a new computer. Right. I was being spat all over the screen. Kind of, what do you mean? Anyway, but even though I had a decent experience with them, and I got what I wanted, and the person I dealt with was absolutely great. Do you have, and I'm not going to name them because I wouldn't put them in the loyalty leader category in my own mind. But do you have companies that you hold out as being broadly in that category of loyalty leaders, just because of what they do and how they do things?
There are so many great examples. Companies like Enterprise Rent-A-Car, for example. Okay. And loyalty leading companies. The way I think about loyalty leaders is they understand that it all begins with your employees. Right. Are the employees loyal? Will they recommend this as a place to work? Are they excited? Are they having fun at work? That then leads to behaviors that produce loyal customers, which then leads to faster business growth, which then drives the bottom line. It has to happen in that order. And too often people just want to jump to growth and profit and skip the first 2 steps, which are how you create a sustainable, profitable business. Sure. But to your earlier point, we've got a lot of organizations that have been running these huddles. Everybody from a state government office in Minnesota to casinos in California to a high-end retailer throughout Europe to auto repair shops. You think, auto repair shops, really? I mean, these guys are getting together and doing huddles and talking about empathy and responsibility and generosity. we were measuring the customer service scores for this auto repair chain. 20 of their stores did an early test of the huddle process, and in a period of 6 months, these guys that are under the bonnet of cars improved their customer service scores by an average of 10 points. 3 improved them by more than 20 points.
Wow.
And so this idea of talking about these principles, making space in the whirlwind of our busy life for just 15 minutes a week, celebrating people, sharing stories, making little commitments to each other. It takes stuff that we learned in kindergarten and brings it back into the forefront of our daily lives.
And do you think that actually that's kind of one of the key principles of this is that over and above the empathy, responsibility and generosity is that actually by making space for something, it allows us to, if we focus on it and we give it attention, then we sort of like give it life. Is that the real key, the real key to this?
Exactly. Ritz-Carlton, well known for customer service.
Yeah.
They do a huddle, and they've been doing them for years at every level of the organization every day. In the book, we prescribe a 15-minute huddle a week. Ritz-Carlton does them every day from top to bottom, and it's what keeps them at the top of their game.
Right.
Horst Schultz told everybody, we're ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And that sounds great, but to bring that to life and to reinforce that, you got to have that huddle and go through these principles and practices and celebrate people.
Yeah. I guess it's like it is that sort of thing. It feels almost like in many ways, a very Buddhist way of thinking about things. Is that it's almost like focusing and paying attention to things, like meditating on something, and then if you do so, that it's more like to manifest itself. But because otherwise, if you don't, then it's like it's like a lazy approach to trying to. You're basically wishing for something to happen rather than actually, manifesting it by focusing on it.
That's right. And almost every mission statement talks about the importance of customers, right?
Yeah.
But if we're not willing to carve out 15 minutes a week to celebrate the people who are doing an incredible job for customers and talk about these principles, we got to put our money where our mission is.
Absolutely. So a couple of things that one thing that occurred to me is, so before this call, I was telling you about some of the stuff that I've done, and I was and I referred to the book that I wrote back in 2016 called How to Wow, and in part of the book I mentioned a piece of research. I think it came from ClickFox originally, and it's quite old now. I think it's about 6 years or so old, and they did a piece of research was talking about the sources of loyalty, and that they're trying to debunk this whole idea around that loyalty programs actually drive loyalty, rather than that they're just like rewards programs rather than actually loyalty programs. And their research showed that they believe that sort of almost 90% of all loyalty is driven by 2 points on the customer's journey. And the first point is in and around the point of sale, i.e. the buying experience. And then the second point, I think that was about 50%, or just short of 50% of the 80%. And then the remainder was what you do when something goes wrong. Sandy, in your experience, do you think that research still holds up, that those are the two main points that drive our loyalty and how we think about brands and the experiences that we have?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's just such common sense.
Yeah.
And that's why touch point metrics, when they survey, right after you buy the garden rake at the store, we point out in the book, are not the best way to run your business, because you really want to know, did the rake that we so pleasantly sold Adrian at the store actually help him get the real job done? Because if you get home and the thing breaks as you move a bunch of soil in your backyard, you're not feeling so good about that hardware store anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So it's both the point of sale and when things go wrong. And then, do we handle that well when you bring the rake back, or you call and you're angry with me for selling it to you because I got you the wrong tool? Yeah. Do we take responsibility and say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, bring it back, we're going to take care of this? Sure. So if we flip this on its head a little bit, I mean, what are some things that you see companies commonly do that sort of gets in the way of, simple stuff that gets in the way of building loyalty kind of with their kind of customers, apart from giving different deals to new customers as opposed to existing kind of ones?
Well, that's the mindset that gets in the way of building loyalty, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. I mean, there's nothing more frustrating than, so you're telling me that you're going to give new customers a better deal than the loyal customer. I mean, there's something wrong with that. The thing that gets in the way are management putting into place a system that prevents people from being themselves, from being genuine.
Right.
Giving them scripts to follow. Giving them policies and procedures that the employees hate as much as the customers.
Right.
It's a lose-lose.
Sure.
The best companies free their employees up. I used the Ritz-Carlton example a moment ago, where Schulte told everybody, if you hear about a problem, even if you're the busboy filling up the water glass, you have responsibility for owning that, getting that fixed.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody's complaining about the bathtub drain not working, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Let me call the engineer. We're going to get this fixed right away.
Sure.
So we got to put employees in a position to do the right thing for people.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So, Sandy, I know that we talked about loyalty leaders, and we talked that they are talking about loyalty leaders are represent both leaders as people and leaders as organizations. But given that almost the loyalty leader as a person has to come first before you can create the loyalty leader organization, what's kind of one thing or two things, a couple of things that you think that leaders and executives in this space should be thinking about or should be taking away from our chat or from reading your book? I mean, that in terms of the first steps that they need to, you would advise them to take on this, I guess, it's because it's a loyalty leader sort of pathway in many ways, I guess.
Well, the idea is that everybody, leadership, Stephen Covey said, leadership is a choice. It's not a position.
Yes.
It's not what's on your name tag. I mean, you know you're a leader if you look over your shoulder and there's people following you. And so everybody in the organization not only needs to be a loyalty leader and adopt a loyalty leader mindset, but everybody also needs to be put into a position to live these principles more often.
Right.
And the idea of the huddle is just to remind us in the whirlwind of our daily. And look, we're so busy. We got these revenue targets, expense reduction goals. I got all these tasks that we got to get done by 5:00 today.
Yeah.
We can't forget the power of human connection,
mm-hmm.
and just the little things make an enormous difference between a good and a great experience. Between an experience that I give an 8 and say, yeah, it was good, yeah,
mm-hmm.
it was fun, and oh my gosh, I got to tell you what happened today. I mean, this was incredible. And so that's what we tell leaders. You got to create that wow through these principles.
Okay. I mean, and just sort of drilling into that, I mean, because the thing that I'm really interested in is, you know, almost like what is the little spark that ignites the breaks, that helps people break the bonds of inertia and then creates kind of momentum, particularly in organizations. And a lot of that can start with either any person or manager or supervisor, leader or whatever, or just anybody in an organization. But you talk about that huddle and doing it on a regular basis, whether it's every week or every day or whatever. How would one of those huddles work?
So in the huddle, and the end of each chapter describes exactly how the huddle works. Okay. While the agenda is the same, the content is different.
Right.
Okay. So, in huddle 2, you're going to learn about empathy. In huddle 3, you're going to learn about making a genuine human connection. In huddle 4, you're going to learn about listening to learn. Huddle 5, responsibility. And so it's not just teaching the theory of these things, but there's a lot of stories and exercises and questions that the huddle, everybody can be the huddle leaders, not just the manager of the group. I might say, Adrian, do you mind leading huddle 5 next week? Just read the chapter and just follow the questions at the end and lead us through a discussion. You don't have to have the answers. Just ask the questions and we'll figure out the answers together.
Okay.
That's where the real power is. An example of a question, why aren't we more generous with our customers? What's standing in the way? Yeah,
or something like, what does generous mean to us with respect to our customers? And actually, that'd be an interesting starting point to get different perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, I had a branch manager one time who was just riveted on improving their customer service. A customer comes in, their driver's license had expired. He provided incredible customer service. He drove her to the DMV to get her license renewed. And while this was a great customer service story for this person who got their license renewed, we had to have a conversation about balance, because guess how the branch operated over the next hour when we were a man down.
Sure.
The next 10 customers that came in.
Sure.
So we got to balance all of these things at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Sandy, that's fascinating. And it's actually, I think it's, the thing I find fascinating about it is that it's very insightful, but it's also very simple. But the key is that it's hard to do when you're in that maelstrom of busy organizational kind of life. But actually making the time and the space to focus on these things and actually bring them to the fronts of our minds, and so we can share stories and learn about them is where the real power lies. So I congratulate you on finding ways and sharing with us ways of that, how we can bring that to life. But Sandy, is there anything that we've missed out, or things that you'd like to add, about the book that you want to kind of point out before I let you go, because I know you're a busy man and you've got lots of interviews to do about the book.
Well, Adrian, I'm so honored to be with you. What I would say is, if the idea is intriguing, let people in your company that are interested in this try it.
Right.
We have found that there's a manager here or there who says, I really want to try this. Don't force it on anybody. Let them go run the huddles and just look at the impact on their customer service, on their employee retention and engagement, on their sales numbers, and let that be your guide as to whether this ought to be rolled out more broadly. But
Perfect.
let it come from the ground up.
Sandy, thank you for that. First of all, I want to just say congratulations on the book, which is Leading Loyalty, Cracking the Code to Customer Devotion, which is what the copy that you'll buy in the book, not Fierce Loyalty, which is what it was originally called. So it's Leading Loyalty. It's available in all major sort of outlets. The usual suspects. And congratulate yourselves and your co-authors, Lena and Sean, on a really great book. I mean, I know how hard it takes, how much effort it takes to write one of these things. So I just want to say, congratulations and well done.
Adrian, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time with you today.
Well, that's it for another interview. I really hope you enjoyed it. Now, every time I complete one of these interviews, I learn something new, and I try and incorporate that new learning into my writing, my speaking, my workshops, and the consulting that I do for my clients. If you're interested, you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswimsco.com. But one final thing before I go. Please consider heading over to iTunes or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do listen in again. All the very best.